Righto, so we've seen the footage there of sealing it all up, so we've now got primer. Now this is the last opportunity you've got to fix anything that you might have missed before you actually start going to colour. So this will get rubbed with 240, then 400, and then potentially on the outside panels, probably an 800 on the machine before we put the colour on. But what I wanted to show you now before we get to that stage is with all the work you do, there's always something you miss. So I noticed here, so we've had the locks in this, that's why that's got the marks in here. But you see there's just a little tiny bit of a, you know, a dent or a scratch or something that hasn't been picked up in the other process. So what I need to do now is to fill that. So I'm going to use some multi-surface fine filler that's out of the PPG Start Line range. So it's a really fine putty. So I'm going to put that in that, and then I've got a couple of others, bits and pieces. Now, this being effectively a street car look, we've opted not to fill all of these factory pressings because we want this to look just a little bit better than factory, but it'll have that factory feel about it. So I'm comfortable with those, but I don't want to see a dent or a little mark that I need to correct. So I'm going to put that in now, and then I'm going to start my trace coat. So we'll go back with the dry black, all of this back area, 240, trace it again, then do it with the 400, and then that'll be ready when we go up to PPG. The next episode will be up at the training centre, getting ready to put some paint on. Because this is the back of a panel and there's so many, you know, curves and movement in it, I'm going to use the soft paper. So I find this really good. It's got a foam backing on it. I can just run my hands in. I'm not looking to block it. So I'm going to use that in a 240 and a 400. And that comes in a roll like that. Now, there's a good chance when I do this, I'm going to rub through on a few edges. So another product that we use is just a 1K epoxy rub through primer. So if I've got a little edge somewhere, I can just pressure pack that, give it a little scuff before we go to colour. So because I'm doing a lot of the rubbing here, once this goes up the training centre, I believe we'll probably end up putting a ground coat on it. But if you're doing it at home and you sort of get this panel to a certain stage but you can't paint it till the next day, then realistically you can use this. Now the other thing is with your primers that once you put the primer on, you've got 72 hours to rub it and paint it. Now if you can't do it in that time frame, which is clearly what's going to happen with us, we will then put a ground coat on to make sure we've got good adhesion. So this is a never-ending learning curve. So this is a product that I haven't used before, as in the primer, and it went on really flat and nice, and I started rubbing it with the 240 and it was pretty clear to me that that was too coarse. So I've gone back to the 400. The other thing that happened is when I went to put the dry coat on, because it's nice and flat, it doesn't really want to stick to it. So I've ended up reverting back to the some acrylic, black acrylic that I've just sprayed on there, you know, as you would always do back in the day. And it's working really nice. So those couple of spots, I've put that filler in, I've rubbed them out, and I've got one here as well. And if you have a look at the other door here, I've got this one pretty much all rubbed up. Now, I was saying about if you rub through, so you can see here I've got a bit of bare metal and a bit of the poly showing through. So I've actually grabbed the wrong tin, but this comes in all different colours, as in G5, G6. So I'll find one out the back that's the right colour, but I just thought I'd spray that on to show you that it's a 1K epoxy rub through primer, but it seals it up so that it can sit before we go up to PPG next week. So it's rubbing out nice with the 400. A little trick that I use to get all these back edges, you can actually use just a filler card, an applicator, so that you can get into these back edges, and then I use that along here as well to actually rub those. And then things like this and these spot welds, you really need to make sure you get in just with a point with your thumb to make sure that you get rid of the orange peel in the bottom. Otherwise, when you spray it, not only will you have a spot weld, but it's going to look like it's full of orange peel. So rubbing out nice. I'll just keep working my way along. I'll get the other one done now, and then we'll flip them over and show you how we rub the other side. All right, I'm going to jump on the outside now and just give you an idea what goes on here. So the process now is, this is primer, so we should have, you know, everything straight and where we want it. We can still do a little bit with our line at the top here. So I've just marked that out with the tape where I want to cut up to. Now I'm going to use 240, and I'm just looking to get rid of that trace with the 240 initially, and then I'm going to retrace it and go to 400. And I'll do the 400, I would think, with the machine. But this one here is just to make sure I've got everything where I want it. Now the reason I got the mesh here is I used to use the mesh until they brought out the Galaxy. Now when they brought the Galaxy out, the holes that are in it are a multi-hole for, you know, multi-purpose fit everything. So on the Mirka blocks, I just find that a lot of the holes don't line up. So just one of my little hacks, I guess. I've actually gone through and drilled some extra holes in so that when I line that up, it just works a little bit more efficiently than it did without them. So all I've done is got a 1/4 inch drill, and I've drilled the holes to line up, and then just put a tapered drill on there, like a countersunk drill, so that nothing sticks up. And I just find it works more effectively from a dust point of view, and I don't have to have the vacuum running quite as fast, which means less noise. So just a little hack from Howard that'll make that work a little bit more efficiently. So hopefully I'm going to put this on, and it'll come out nice. And I don't have any repairs to do. So as the whole process goes, you can see here it's slightly low there. So I'm just going to work my way around that and take that out. So this is getting quite fine now. You can see how there's still a bit left on the end here. This is something I was talking about before. When you're sanding, you've got to watch you don't roll your edges, or when you're finished, if you're doing the panels off the car like I am, you end up with each panel going like that down the side of the car. So I'll be looking to keep this as flat as I can and get that out to that edge. Like that. So now we've got rid of it, and then I'll go around and do my radius as well. You can see how it's picking up that line, and I'll block this one up, and then I'm going to have to go along and put that little reverse curve in. Now if you're going to tape off your body lines like this, bring the camera around from this angle, you can see the variations, a bit sharper there than there, and then here I've hardly got anything. Doesn't take very much at all to change the shape. You can see there I was chasing that out, and bang, I'm through the primer. So remembering, I'll put probably, there's no steel there, so I won't need to put a bit of spot prime on it. If you go through to steel, we'll just put a bit of spot prime until we get up to PPG. If you're looking to do something about the dust in your workshop, think about going to something like this Mirka system. Now I've been using it for a long time now. It's distributed by PPG in Australia. Great product. It's not the cheapest on the market, but it's a great product, and it will help you to not only keep your workshop clean, you'll get really good results as well. Righto, so another subject I want to talk about, John, is primers. And we've got, you know, normal, I don't know how many primers you've got, but there's a whole lot for a whole lot of different reasons. Yeah. And we'll probably talk about the ones that are specific to you know, the guy doing a car at home or the guy that's got a custom shop or a resto shop, because that's what I'm doing and probably what the show's more about, and it is a muscle car show. So in this particular, my plan with this particular build is to do poly, and we've had that discussion elsewhere. Once I've got that poly blocked out, we're going to use the Prima, is it the word? PrimaPRIME? PrimaPRIME. But there's obviously high build primers.
Prima build,
Prima build. And then once again, in other areas of what you do, as a company, there's obviously lots of different primers.
Yeah.
So what do we need to look for when we're doing a job that's going to give us a primer that's not all things to all people, because that's not possible, but it's going to give us a sort of broad range of...
Yeah, so primers can be a very personal thing. You know, some people will use a primer their whole life if they're a spray painter from an apprentice.
Yeah, I understand that.
You know, so they just get we can't use anything else because we have so much trust in it. But a lot of the new primers, you know, new technology primers are very good. The resins are different, they're better. So I really encourage people to use new technology primers. So if you're going to, here's a good example, if you're going to use spray polyester, PrimaPRIME's great because it goes on smoother, flatter, and it's easier to sand. So in this situation, we're not trying to get the panel straight, we're trying to just fill our scratches and get it ready to paint. If we were going to go over body filler, we'd probably use Prima Build. Prima Build, a little bit more build, a little bit harder to block, which is what you want if you're on a speed file. Yeah, a little bit harder to block, a little bit more profile, so it's a little bit dry, and that's what makes it hard to rub. So again, we're building primers based on what people are asking for and what type of work you're trying to do.
Okay. Now, something that we spoke about off camera was what hardener to use.
Yeah. So if I was going to prime inside a bonnet or a boot lid, I'd use a fast hardener. If I was going to prime the whole outer shell, I'd probably use a medium hardener. Depending on the temperature, if it's scorching hot, you'd even slow it down further. But if you can go into a medium hardener, a slow thinner, that will lay your primer down nice and smooth and make your life easier.
I was just going to say, because you've explained this to me before, because it's all very well to say, oh, you use that and it's better. What happens, from my understanding, is the hardness, it's going to go off, especially once you bake it the same anyhow. But when you apply it, if you're using a medium, it gives the paint time to lay down.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're using a fast, it's almost drying out of the gun because it's got a fast hardener. And if you use accelerated thinner, that's even more so. And then if you use a slow hardener, slow thinner, and you paint the side of the car, it's going to tend to want to fall off.
Yeah.
So it's really about, what, 10 minute?
For a flash off?
The difference in the hardener, from an application point of view, it's really only within that 10 minutes is the variation. It's just the way it's going to settle on the job.
Yeah, and if it's a large job and it's a hot temperature, you won't notice it. But what you'll notice is that when you're spraying the quarter panel, that dry spray that you're generating, you know, is melting back into the roof you've just primed.
Right.
If you've primed the roof and then come down to the quarter, that dry spray starts to go onto your roof. So your second coat starts to go over dry spray. So what you want is pick the right hardener and thinner, so everything, by the time you finish priming the job, everything feels
smooth. All looks nice,
Because you don't want to be priming over dry spray, and you don't want to be blocking dry spray because it's hard work. Because it's like sandpaper on sandpaper.
Now, when we did Boss XC, you used what I think the loose terminology was like a ground coat. So I think it was 627 or something. Now that
a wet on wet.
Now that's a wet on wet primer. So we got something else again. And what I liked about that was when we put it on, or when you put it on, it had that almost a semi-gloss appearance, and you could check your body lines before you put the colour on. So that if you've got an issue, like on a big build like that, and the car came here, and some days we had like 7 people working on it, you prime it all and go, oh, well, that looks good. Oh, there's something there. Maybe how'd you better get in there and fix that? So there are so many different products, and it's really a case of, if you're at that very beginning stage, find a good product, and this PrimaPRIME that I'm going to use now, I'll be able to tell you what that's like. Prior to that, we were using the Vibrance one, which has now moved on. Is there something similar to that in the Deltron range?
Yeah, the families are based on the PrimaPRIME, probably more along the Prima build
yeah,
than the PrimaPRIME, because that was made more for specifically a custom market.
Okay, so the thing about the build primers is they're not, you don't have to use it as the full build. You can, on the data sheet, it'll tell you can mix it with 0.5, which I presume's 5%, is it?
Yeah.
Yep, so you can use 5%.
Well, it's half a part of. Yeah.
A half a part,
Let's not
yeah.
get technical.
So 0.5, 1 or 1.5, so when I do it on the scales, so that, you know, obviously at 0.5 it's thicker and then you go down. So the ability is there when you look at your job, you can sort of go, I need a lot of build on this because I just haven't quite got it how I'd like, or you can back it off with the amount of thinners that's in it, that it layers it to lay down like a normal primer. So what I liked about that with the Vibrance when I used that all the time was the fact that I had the option of whether I was using it as a straight primer or a high build primer. And if you're in an environment where you don't want to have 10 tins of product, that high build can do a lot of the job for you.
Yeah.
Remembering that there's probably a better product that might be a wet on wet style one because it'll lay down just that little bit better.
And the build much lower. So 2 coats of that wet on wet will be less than 50 microns. 3 coats of the high build could be a couple of 100 microns.
Okay. So my aim is to be able to show you the products that lets you work within the Deltron range and not have 10 different hardeners, 10 different thinners, and a whole lot of different products to try and minimise that back, because I know that there's a cost to that, but also just a maintenance of working out what you got. All right, hopefully that's covered most of the things about the primers, and we'll look to talk about something else later on. So just following on from what I was talking to John about there, and that was, you know, quite some weeks ago that we did that little interview, I've chosen to go with the PrimaPRIME, not the high build. And I'm sort of regretting it a little bit. And as I said in that previous piece, I traditionally would use a high build primer. The fact that I've used poly, I chose not to. Now, I don't normally use poly either. So I felt that I had the panels really good in the poly, and I've probably missed the boat by just that little tiny bit. And what I'm trying to do here is to do this car the way I think would be a cost-effective way for a shop, or if you're doing it at home without all the complexities. But I'm finding it difficult to do a lesser job than I might do if I'm doing the whole thing on a car like Boss XC. So where does that leave us? I'm in a position now where I've got a couple of cut throughs already. I've cut it with 240, knowing that it should have been right. It's probably not as nice as I'd like it. So to chase it out, I'm now cutting through, and I'll make a decision today whether or not I reprime it before it goes up to PPG, or whether I just do a couple of pressure pack touch-ups, and then when we go up there, we'll hit it with a machine and then put one of those ground coats on it, which I'm pretty sure that's what we're going to do. So I'm working through the process. My body line, I've done a Prepsol shine to get an idea. My body line, I've got a little bit of variation that I'm not happy with. I'm through to poly here already, and I'm a bit fat here. So I'm going to put my black trace back on. And then I may even go back to 180 and give it a chop and get it how I want it, and then make a decision on how much product's left on it, whether I actually put another coat of PrimaPRIME, which is, you know, not an over amount of time to do that, but I'm just trying to do it in a way that it should be done, but I'm doing something new and I'm just losing my way a little bit. So we're going to get there, but I just wanted to show you that it's not all beer and skittles sometimes. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get used to a new product and to get the result you want without spending weeks and weeks and weeks. So you never stop learning, do you? So like I keep saying, new products. When I've started blocking this, I said I was going to block it with 240. It wasn't coarse enough, and when I've done my little check with the Prepsol shine, I've got a few marks in this top area, and I have one here, and you can see. Oh, it's a ghost. So this area here, you can see where I've actually cut through back to the epoxy, because I had a bit of just a little kiss in there that was sitting down, and I've blocked that now with 180 and then gone back over it with the small electric block, and that's much better. But I've got a couple of little lines in here I'm not happy with, and I believe that's come about because I've gone too light with the paper, and what it does is it rides over any imperfections or the orange peel. So I've got new paper and I've got new primer and I'm learning, so I'm just going to now redo this and I'm going to hit it with some 180, and I believe that'll take it out. But I'm going to re-prime this door now. Once I get the other one done, I'll check it and I'll put it in and just put some coats back on it and it'll be ready to go up there. Righto, so just as a recap to round out this episode, PrimaPRIME, 3 coats as a primer. It's not overly thick and it's not as thick as I'm used to. So what I've determined that I'm doing is I'm taking the Galaxy paper in a 180 on the long block, put my trace on, block it out, make sure I'm happy with the lines, then go with this one with the 240, work back over it, get out any small bits and pieces, and then with some 400 on this one with the interface, and that gets it ready to put the ground coat before we put colour on.